Anastasia Lowe is a Puma ambassador, as well as a CompTrain ambassador and owner of Odyssey FPN. And today we have her on this episode of In Lifting Color. We talk CrossFit Open, fitness, and her experience competing in the sport of CrossFit. Hi, welcome to another episode of In Lifting Color. I'm Jess.
I'm Brandon.
And we have a special guest today, and we will allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Anastasia, also known as Annie, whatever. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm a Puma ambassador and a CompTrain ambassador and a CrossFit athlete and coach.
All right, so you touched on everything we usually ask first.
Which is perfect.
But so you said you're from Houston. Is that where you're born and raised Houston?
Yeah, born and raised in Houston, Texas. I went to Belton, Texas for college, but other than that, I've been Houston pretty much all my life.
Okay.
Nice.
That's cool. So when it comes to CrossFit and weightlifting, it was introduced to you in Houston, obviously. Or
no, it actually wasn't. It was actually, I kind of discovered CrossFit and weightlifting in college.
Okay.
I was actually in my very last semester of my senior year, and my major is sport management, and they had you had to take two different exercise classes that were required. One of them was a running class, which I absolutely hated because I'm a terrible runner.
Running is awful.
And then the other one, you got to just choose whatever you wanted. And it was my very last semester, and the only thing that fit my schedule was this. They did like a little collaboration with a CrossFit box off campus, where you would go there and take classes, and they would count as if you were taking like CrossFit class, basically. So that was the only thing that fit into my schedule that semester. And I didn't want to take it because I thought CrossFit was so stupid. I thought CrossFit was dangerous. All the negative things that people think about CrossFit.
Yes.
I thought all of that. So I didn't want to take it, but I ended up taking it. Literally, fell in love, and now it's my entire life basically.
Yeah.
So.
What year was that?
That was 2015. Yeah, 2015.
Okay. All right. And then so you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you are a CompTrain ambassador and a Puma ambassador. How did that even come about?
I always tell people, because I've had a couple of questions like that, and I'm like, it was just God, 100%. It was a very random kind of thing. I just got a message. It was back in probably October, September, somewhere around there. I got a message from someone. They said, "Hey, I work with Puma. We'd love to talk to you about what we're doing in the CrossFit space." And I thought it was spam. I did not answer it for I don't know how long. I feel like I left it in my inbox for a week or something. And I was like, it's Instagram spam. It's someone trying to con me. I'm not answering.
Yeah.
And I told my girlfriend about it. And she was like, "Well, the person's account looks like it's a real person." And I was like, "Okay, I'll answer it and just see." I legit just thought it was spam. And it was a person who works at Puma, and she's absolutely awesome. And we ended up talking, and it was actually a very strange intersection because she goes to CrossFit New England, which is CompTrain headquarters.
Yes.
And she just said that my name was kind of floating around there. And this was before CompTrain had started their ambassador program, so I guess that might have been why it was kind of floating around. And then they kind of looked me up on Instagram, and then just kind of just snowballed from there.
Nice.
But it was just this, and then both of things kind of collided, and around the same time that I became a Puma ambassador, a few months later, CompTrain contacted me and asked me if I wanted to be an ambassador with them. So it was 100% Jesus working in my life, because I did nothing with it. It was just the most crazy thing.
Divine intervention.
Yeah.
And you had been following the CompTrain programming, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I've been following CompTrain for 4 years now. Yeah. So I actually just, again, it was just a random thing. I've always followed them, but I'd never been I didn't think I was on anyone's radar for sure.
You're like, who's checking these scores? It's fine. Because are you like Sugar WOD, like under the CompTrain, the whole thing?
Yeah. Well, that was the other funny thing because at the time that I was with CompTrain, me and a friend had to share an account because I was on CrossFit coach salary and I didn't have the money to pay for a full account. So I didn't actually get to submit my scores all the time because we were sharing it. So it was like under her name. I didn't want to submit my scores under her name. And so like I had finally got my own account.
Okay.
And I'd only been probably within that like leaderboard for probably about a year at that point.
Wow.
But I'd always like posted like on Instagram, like with the hashtag and all that stuff. I'd been reposted by them like 2 or 3 times.
Nice.
So at least maybe their social media person knew who I was. I don't think anyone else did.
Yeah. You had somebody paying attention. That's cool. So what does that mean to you to be the ambassador? Like what does that entail as far as your responsibilities or anything like that?
For CompTrain or for Puma?
Both.
Well, for CompTrain, it's basically just being kind of a voice in the community. It's kind of like, and then being a bridge between kind of the CompTrain at CrossFit New England and kind of the athletes, just because obviously their elite athletes are now all training at CrossFit New England, but there's a lot of us other athletes who are just, obviously we're across the world.
Yeah.
So having like feedback and stuff like that from us, having people in the community who are able to approach other people in the community at that level and being able to get everyone excited about things and that kind of thing. It's basically like we get to be one of the voices that are up for the program in a sense and kind of representatives for that.
Nice.
And then for Puma, it's just basically it's the craziest thing. I actually had a conversation that supposed to be releasing like later this month with Puma, like a Zoom thing, and they just genuinely, the way that it feels like is they just like us to be us. Like that's what being an ambassador for Puma is kind of being, is just being you with their support, which is like really insane and really cool. Because it's very rare that people are just like, hey, just keep doing you,
right,
and we're just going to support that,
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. It's just like, I get to be me. I get to keep on doing what I'm doing, and they also are giving me the tools to do it. I get to like run things. I was able to run a whole like rowing series, like kind of open competition with prizes that was very accessible because I didn't have to charge for prizes charge for anything. So I was able to get like a lot of people involved online, and that's what basically it is. It's like this relationship where they're just giving us platforms to continue doing what we do, which is absolutely the best thing. Like it's absolutely crazy. It's like, do you?
Cool.
All right, now let's ask a serious question, a double serious question.
We've been serious this whole time. Oh, sorry. He can't see. Sorry.
I know we've been serious, but we're getting background information. Let's talk about in lifting color information.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So Puma, we know that's international. That can go unsaid that it's diverse. CompTrain, as an ambassador there, how diverse is that? How comfortable is it talking about diversity as an ambassador for CompTrain? And then I guess when like all the CrossFit stuff happened back last year, how uncomfortable was that? How crazy was it, being you? And we'll double up on this, even your gym. So let's answer it as a CompTrain ambassador, and then let's answer it as a coach in your gym, an athlete at your gym. How comfortable were the conversations? How uncomfortable were the conversations about race, discrimination, equality, everything?
Yeah. What's actually kind of funny is, again, another intersection that I assume was maybe part of my name being brought up with CompTrain. When everything with like George Floyd happened and then Greg Glassman happened, in the community, there was finally like a response, and people finally started saying like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're not standing up for this. And we're not doing whatever, which was for the CrossFit community, wasn't something that I ever saw happening.
Yeah.
Just because it's very, the community or the kind of aspects, some of the aspects of CrossFit can lend themselves toward being very like hyper America in a sense.
Yes.
And unfortunately now, like some of that hyper America, hyper patriotism can turn into racism.
Yeah.
And that's not to say you can't be Black and patriotic. It's
Right.
just that sometimes that's what it can become like this tumbling like thing of just going and going and going. So I think like within like the CrossFit community, everyone wants to believe that like, or as before, everyone wanted to believe that racism wasn't an issue, that we were past it,
Mm-hmm.
And so when all that stuff happened and people started actually actively standing up and making stances, I think it was still very like challenging for people within the CrossFit community to do that, because unlike kind of the general US, it was like obviously everyone in the general US wants to say racism is wrong or whatever, but I think there was like a lot of fear of alienation from a lot of people in CrossFit and like companies in CrossFit, because they didn't want to push too far against this kind of like customer base. So when people were making the stance and stuff, I would like credit like Rogue as someone who very much came out and just cut the line right down and said, hey, this is racism and we're not going to be tolerating it, and just said it, like just straight up said it. And unfortunately at the time, CompTrain kind of posted something that was very middle of the road. It didn't really go one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really upsetting to me because I'd been following the program for so long, and because I really believe in a lot of their core philosophy, which is that like character comes before everything. It's always character first. And that's what has always drawn me to the program and been like kind of a drive for me in using it, is just that they believe that better people make better athletes.
Right.
And so to me, I was like, if you're not going to make a stance on this, this is like in direct opposition to your core values, realistically. Like if you're not clearly going to say, this isn't okay, this is why, and this is what we're doing. It felt like kind of like it felt kind of like they were ignoring their own ethos in a sense.
Yeah.
So I kind of just actually commented on their original post, and I wrote a whole thing about how, a little mini essay about how disappointed in them I was, and how I felt like this was a complete lack of like, showing their values. Like they had an opportunity to really show what they're about, and they kind of missed it.
Yeah.
And thankfully at the time, also several other people commented similar comments. Yeah. So it was really clear that there was an issue in what they were saying or what they had communicated. And from there, they actually ended up sending me a message, and they were kind of like, hey, let's talk. So we had like kind of like a discussion about it. They asked me about like resources that like they thought that they should use and stuff like that. And I sent them some resources and everything. And that kind of, I think, kind of opened sort of a door. I know that they've talked about, at the time, that was like a while back, at the time they said that they were working on some things. I know that they have been working on things. I don't know exactly what their next steps with diversification and all that stuff are. And I'm hoping that that's something that's going to be coming soon. But just even been able to have, it was nice being able to actually have someone, people will say all the time, like, we're going to do something, but actually making a second step is very hard.
Right.
So having them actually reach out and ask like for resources, that was like a good second step. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what their third step will be. But that being said, I think I can't speak for what the CompTrain base that looks like diversification wise. I know the leadership isn't diverse, but I also can't say how many athletes are diverse. I also don't know what the area like CFNE kind of is in. So I can't really say much about that either. But I know that they are making efforts to kind of work on some things. And I mean, it's been like really cool within the community, just even within that kind of people being able to stand up and talk about it, and then them being receptive to it. Because there's been more than one thing where I've seen where they're just like, and people double down and don't want to be receptive to any kind of feedback like that. And I like giving credit where credit is 100% due. They were like totally receptive to it.
Good.
And so, I mean, like, that's within the CrossFit community. I think we know that, like, generally speaking, CrossFit isn't a super diverse sport at this time. That being said, like, our gym, my local gym, I think is actually kind of an exception to the rule in that we have a pretty solid, diverse base. Like, we have, despite being in a very suburban area, we do have like a significant, I think, amount of people of color in our gym, which again is actually kind of crazy considering how we're very much like rooted in a very suburban center. Or like we're right across from a high school and a middle school in the suburbs of like Houston, Texas. So
what's your gym
Houston, sorry?
What's your gym called?
Oh, CrossFit Nevo.
Nevo.
Yeah. So Houston's a super diverse city, but again, CrossFit is always kind of known to be very not diverse. But I think I'm thankful that like I go to a gym where we are pretty diverse. That like being said, there's still always the awkward conversations and the awkward comments and everything like that. And that's never going to be something that I think, well, not never, but it's going to be something that we can always like escape right now. At least in CrossFit is just going to happen unless you're blessed enough to go to like a gym in a very like diverse area, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I've had like plenty of them, especially as a coach. It's one of those things where for most of my interactions happen when during class when we're talking, or like that there's a small talk kind of before class when you're warming up or whatever. That's where a lot of those conversations kind of creep in.
Yeah.
And for me, it's usually that I think people get a little bit too comfortable with me. Like they get a little bit too comfortable with like me, and they just assume I have the same values as them because they're really comfortable with me and they kind of see me as like not family but very, very close because someone that they see every single day,
Sure.
So I've had plenty of those conversations that are uncomfortable, awkward, and having to call those out.
Yeah.
Those happen for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it is really nice that, like, fortunately, again, I go to a gym in a diverse area. When everything happened last summer, the owners we all sat down. They hey, let's talk. And we talked about what they were doing with affiliation. We talked about everything like that. So it was like a very open discussion. They didn't just ignore it.
Yeah.
And they posted about it too on Instagram. They said, we don't discriminate and all that stuff. So even being on a small, again, that sounds like a small thing, but for a lot of people, especially in a very, the state that we're in sometimes, those having to saying those things outright, like, can jeopardize your business. So I'm very happy with where I'm at, but I'm excited to keep pushing forward on certain things.
So something that you said, our gym actually follows the CompTrain programming, and I have been I've been at that gym for 2 years, a little 2.5 years maybe now, and I also was hard stand on CompTrain and like Chasing Excellence podcast, like hardcore. I made my core values because I listened to a podcast like 2 years ago that Ben Bergeron did, and I was like, I am all into whatever this man says. And the same post came up, and I was extremely disappointed because first I was like, okay, they said something. This is great because I didn't know, because again, I've been like all into it. And so it was definitely one of those things where I was like, oh, not what, and like, we still follow the programming. I still follow the programming at that gym, but it definitely, I think that was a big part of what happened. And we kind of talked to Ariel Sanders about this. Like, it's not about cancel culture, but it is about like, okay, I follow and praise and like acknowledge this brand often and like, and promoting it. And this is what it looks like how do you turn that around? So it's interesting for you to have that conversation as well, and that you got approached from it, because I felt very much the same. Like, I was like, no, don't do this, Ben. Like, like I've been like sending your podcast out. I've been reposting it. I've been sending it to aunts, uncles, friends. Like, don't do this to me.
That's two different things. He's talking about, succeeding in life. That's one thing when it comes to that podcast of chasing excellence, but it's a totally different thing when you're talking about, race and
But
discrimination.
is it different? Because
Yeah,
I think
it's
the
different
issue
because
was,
think about it. He
You're
didn't,
not gonna
he
convince me.
hasn't lived how you lived.
but there's a difference, and that's the point. I think it was that I'm not asking you to say that I've been through this, but I'm asking you to acknowledge that this is a true experience for your athletes, for maybe some of your gym members. If you have a program that's geared to, I'm doing it in New Jersey, he doesn't know me, but I'm following all these things. Like, it's not about him knowing, but like the statement that was made was very wishy-washy. And it wasn't like, I stand and believe that Black Lives Matter, that racism is true and real.
He said he didn't know that it still existed, right? Or something like
It
that.
was
Or
something
he didn't
weird.
feel like it was still there.
Yeah, the CompTrain statement was very neutral, and then I think Ben followed up with a video that was saying that he didn't really know that racism existed and everything like that, which, you know, I think ultimately what matters is, well, for me, what ultimately matters was that the statement was very neutral. And I think when it comes to race, you should never be neutral. Like, that's not something to really be neutral about. And that's what like made me make my mega essay comment. And then to me, what it came back to was, again, core values of everything about being a better person. Better people make better athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Better people aren't racist.
Right. Hello. Yeah.
But not only are they not racist, but they're anti-racist. That's what they should be. So it was just, and for me, honestly, it was like, I was just like fed up at that point. It was like, it had been rough. Like, all this stuff coming out already had been rough. So then again, like what you're saying exactly about like you're so intertwined with the programming, the methodology, all of their core values or ethos. It was like it was a very like confusing kind of thing to happen when I was like, clearly they would just say, you know, this.
Yeah.
Which again, like, but the positive side of that was, because I was like ready to be like done.
Yeah.
The positive side of it was that they were able to come back and just say like, hey, we were wrong. Like they just straight up like said, like, I think one of the comments back to me was like, yeah, we messed up with the statement or something to that effect, essentially.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so we're okay. Like,
it's a start.
So there is a
start.
character thing still here.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me and
devil's advocate, here we go.
I'm not trying to defend anybody, because the last conversation we had, or 2 conversations ago we had, I was like, I can't keep giving these people the benefit of the doubt of you don't know what you don't know. But at the same time, you're getting mad at, not mad, but you're disappointed in somebody not making a statement that you expect them to make, but their response was in a response of, you don't know what you don't know.
No, but I think it was more so that it was like, kind of like you said, it was that neutral. Like, there's no reason that you should be on a neutral plane. Like, him not knowing that that's in the, like, that's different. Like, that's why.
Not in reference. What I was talking about was specifically the CompTrain response, not like Ben Bergeron's response. Like the actual company, I guess is what I'm saying.
Because I think it's more of like you said, like you can't be neutral. Like you can't be silent. And it was like at that time, a lot of brands were feeling like we have to say something. Mm-hmm. But it was then, okay, but what you gonna say? Because you know, like it's not like, oh well, you know, yeah. Like I think it's not about like you don't know what you don't know, but more so that like it's a neutral, like very vanilla. Like, you know, like I don't want to displease my members, whereas like Rogue was like, no, we don't agree, we're not here for it. And they're in, like, you know, and they brand, like, you know, and they are very, it's kind of interesting that you said about the patriotic, because sometimes, you know, there was a period of time where being super patriotic looked like you could be racist, but it's like very patriotic, very made USA, and like they're still able to acknowledge and say like, no, this is wrong. We don't stand for it. We promote diversity. We do acknowledge that Black Lives Matter. We do want to represent all people.
Let me ask this question, Annie. How, when you have your big companies giving their responses, then, and they should be, do you feel, one, that companies are still continuing? Because I feel like it's not continuing enough. And 2,
continuing to what?
Continue to like push the movement forward, just have the discussion. And then also 2, do we or should we have a genuine meter, Like, how genuine is their statement? Should we be reading into statements and feel, or just be happy with a statement, or happy with statements and or singular statements, or should we be like really reading into them and feeling if they're genuine or not? I mean, that's like a question, but
yeah. I mean, I think in the case of, again, with Rogue, I think it's like, for me with Rogue, it was regardless of how many Black employees they have, they stand to alienate a lot of their customer base by whatever they say, in a sense, in this situation. Like, there's risk involved regardless. So for them as a company, I think you could be like, oh, they're trying to please their employees, but they also have customers to please that are probably more important, because employees are a dime a dozen. If you wanted to be like just real, like they could just hire somebody else if they wanted to. Like there isn't, I don't think there's this, I think the drive is always the customer in a sense, in that way. So I think there is like, again, as a business, you're taking a risk when you make like a stance like that. And anyways, and I know that's why it's difficult, especially if you're like Rogue is bigger, but if you're a smaller business, like some of these like programming things, it's a risk. Like, I'm 100% aware that it's like one of those things where you that's kind of scary. Because I mean, even for me as an individual, like when I post things, it's scary. Like, I totally am like, ooh, I don't know if this is gonna go over bad. I don't know if I'm gonna get a bunch of messages, that kind of thing. So I'm like totally like understanding of the fact that a lot of these situations when companies are making posts, especially when they come out neutral, it's because it's a very like scary thing, and you might want to say something, but you're afraid of what the response might be. And so it's like one of those things where you just kind of have to have that courage to take that leap and that jump to make the full stance. I do think that sometimes it is important to kind of to read not in between the lines, but read for the genuine part of it. Because you could also say, that's not genuine because everyone's making statements, like everyone's saying something. So like, how is everyone's statement necessarily genuine? But at the same time, it's also, they don't necessarily even have to make a statement at all. So I think like reading for that authenticity and that kind of genuine aspect is important, as is like making steps after the statement. And that's, I think, the more like, now we've gotten to the point where a lot of people have made statements, but it's like, have they made next steps?
Right.
And I don't ever want to like rush to like say like wonder if someone's done it, because it's again never cut and dry. Like when that comes to anything, you can't be like, okay, so where's your diversity? Prove it now. That's very much like a thing that would take time, and I believe that. It's just the only, I think, next part is being transparent about where you're going with it, and that's what I would like to see from companies who have made statements and have said things that are genuine. Is like, I totally understand. Again, you're a business. Nothing is just as simple. Just like when people are disaffiliating,
right.
That's not a simple process. Like, there's affiliates get like discounted insurance. So if you disaffiliate, you're trying to find insurance for your gym that's affordable is going to be like completely different. It's going to be really difficult.
Right.
So like in the same way when people are disaffiliating, I'm like, that's not necessarily something that I would be like, you have to not be an affiliate or I'm not going to trust you about it. Like,
right.
But I understand that that's a very complex thing. And so is diversity and inclusion. It's a complex thing. What I would like to see from like companies, from programming, like companies or whoever, is just being transparent about this is how we're working towards making things more inclusive, more diverse. Just be transparent about it. You can be like, hey, we haven't figured it out yet.
Right.
But be like, we're actively working on something would be like, I think, the good next step.
Yeah. Yeah. We recently talked to somebody who owns a box in New York, but it was like a casual conversation. He was saying how he was just like, we do have a very diverse box, but I didn't realize I wasn't being inclusive, so like, changing the bathrooms to be just gender neutral. Like, he was like, something as simple as that was like so meaningful to like, he was like, just a small few members were like, oh my God, this is so much better for me. Like, personally, I'm going to tell you this about myself, but I didn't want that to be something that changed the way you ran your business. And he was like, even though there was only 3 or 4 people that came up to me, that means other people are either thinking it or other members could join knowing that that's one whole thing. So yeah. And he was like, there's been other things that he's done, but it was just an interesting thing that he was like, that was one small thing I did, but yeah, like, it's just so interesting to think about what could be done. And even with what you just said about taking the risk to what you post or what you put out there, you recently made a very, very perfectly worded post about just saying, like, I'm a Black queer woman and this is what I feel. I don't care what you think, because I'm going to keep saying it about what it should be and how you can practice anti-racism in your day-to-day life. Here are some resources. Here's what you can look at. But if you think you're coming to this page just to see me be fit, you're not just coming to here to see that. What pushed you to do that post? Because that is a risk. You get people, and you're trying to build a brand. You have the potential to have people be like, unfollow, that isn't what I'm here for. Like, what pushed you to do that?
Well, this is actually something that I think I have like gotten from kind of the chasing excellence aspect of things, which is, again, the concept that better people make better athletes. Mm-hmm. Well, to me, like, that means I'm not just an athlete. I think that's what, like, sometimes people want you to be. They want you just to be an athlete. They just want you to just post this thing. Yeah. I think there's so much more to me than the, like, weights that I lift.
Right.
And if I have all this time where I have people who have eyes on me, if I have this period of time, because I don't know how long it's going to last, where I have people like paying attention to me who want information, who want whatever, I have their attention. If I'm not using that to make things better, like, what's the point at all, So a lot of it's driven in that, and it's also just in the fact that I wouldn't consider myself like a lifelong athlete either. This isn't something that was like natural necessarily to me. Yeah. So it's like, for my whole goal, like, I wasn't supposed to do CrossFit. My goal was to, like, I went to work for ESPN as like a sports journalist. That was like my goal. So it's like the appearance part has never been what my goal in life was to be, was like to somehow use my appearance for whatever, or my physical, prowess or whatever, as like a way of making money or whatever. So that, like, is the other thing, is like, I'll tell my girlfriend, like, I'll post something about like nutrition, like that I worked really hard, or like a long post about stuff, and we'll get like half a like of like a video of me like lifting, and I'm like, no one cares about my brain. Like, realistically, that's what it is. It's like, when I wrote that post, it was like, I wanted to share kind of my thoughts on things, and I also wanted to be a part of making things better. And I wanted to make sure that, I think some of the issues with some of the race stuff happens, and people are like, oh, okay, I want to learn more, or people say that they're going to commit to do whatever, but they don't really know what to do, or like where to go, or learn about things. And you can Google it, but like, at a certain extent, you might start getting the same results. You don't really know, like, oh, should I listen to this thing from whoever? Right. And then it becomes, on the flip side, there's also this kind of dialogue in kind of the anti-racist community, which is that white people shouldn't be constantly asking about Black people for education, or asking them for whatever, which can be draining as a Black person. But I also understand that white people don't necessarily know where to go or where to start. Right. So whenever I have like conversations about like anti-racism, I'm like, I have to leave this with a resource. I have to direct this somewhere. Otherwise, I'm just like, for some people, I'm just talking, and they're like, they can agree with me. I'm like, oh, this is wrong, but what do I do about it? Where do I learn more about it? So that post actually was like, I had to listen to every one of those podcasts just to like make sure like everything. I've written podcasts for months, so that post was like 6 months in the making. And so it was just, but like, it was also the again, it's kind of like there's this double-sided part where I can post something like that, and people will want to say, we just want to see you lift, and I'm like, that's not what I'm here for, guys. Like, exactly. I may never make it to the elite level of whatever on CrossFit, like, but I want to know that like I've at least done something for this world that's had some kind of impact or that's helped change things or move things forward. So because I'm a person first, I'm an athlete, you know, like fourth. So like that was kind of like the driving behind it. And also it was just the concept that, because I had posted something back about Stacey Abrams, and someone had posted something like that was to the effect of like, well, I just want to see you work out. I'm like, that's not this page. Like, sorry, but that's not me. That's not this page. Please don't follow me if that's what you want.
Exactly. You're going to get more than that. And we talk about this too with gyms being like, well, don't bring it in here. We only want to talk about working out. And it's like, I'm more than just working out. Like, I love it, but if I bring up something or something happens and I mention like, oh, that's not real cool, like, you can't, like, oh, we're not talking about that, we're talking about snatching, like, you know, like, like, how do we do that? Like, how do you, and maybe you can talk more to this because you are a coach, like, how do you encourage that in your gym?
Yeah, I mean, like, on that note, it's like people can be like, oh, we just want to talk about lifting, it's just a gym. Yeah. But then the same person will say that CrossFit is like the best thing about CrossFit is the community. Well, if the best thing about the CrossFit is the community, it's because we're having conversations that are outside of the workout. We're having like relationships that are outside of the gym, or that, you know, that kind of thing. It's not just weightlifting. Otherwise, there is no community.
Right.
So I think it's just kind of thing as a coach, like, it's been about, honestly, most of it started with, I think more often than not, I'm trying to knock out like misogyny, sexism stuff that people will say, because they're a little more about that than racism typically. But it's like making sure that when someone says something, that I start to dissect it. And that's like my goal is. I don't necessarily start to tell them that it's wrong. I like to start to dissect it. And then as I dissect it with them, like in a joking way, they like, it's like really clear. It makes it clear that I don't really tolerate that, but sometimes it makes them feel stupid for saying whatever it was that they said that was like misogynist, sexist, or racist.
Yeah.
Or homophobic. And so that's what my like usual thing is. If someone says something, I'll say, I'll just straight up be like, I don't understand. And then try to make them to explain it to me. And it's like hard to explain something that's like homophobic or racist, and like without like feeling really bad about it usually.
Exactly.
So typically, like when that's in a class environment, or when it's even just one-on-one, I just try and dissect it. And by the end of the conversation, it doesn't have to be like in your face. It doesn't have to be like mean, which I think is what people like think that like you have to be like, you have to just say that's racist or whatever. Just dissecting it, then usually it's like, ooh, like they kind of like start to understand, like, oh, maybe that's why this isn't appropriate, or maybe that's why this isn't okay to say, or at the very least, they realize they should not say those things to me.
Yep, there you go.
I do that with kids all the time, and they say something, and I'm just like, think about what you said. What does that mean?
Yes, yeah.
Then, well, you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean.
Right.
But it's no.
Like when someone says, "Oh, it's a girl bar," like, "Oh, boys can't touch it." I don't.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch over to the sports side of CrossFit, and I mean weightlifting is automatically a sport, but let's switch over to the sports side, being an athlete. The basic question we usually ask everybody is, how often do you face microaggressions in the sport of CrossFit and in weightlifting? How often do you have those challenges come up and you have to actually do what you do, like you just said, put somebody in their place, or just ask them, I don't understand. So like, is that something you face often, like when you go to competitions and meets, or even just when you're training for yourself at the gym?
You know, one of the bigger things that comes to mind, and I think when I say it, people will just assume that I'm vain, honestly, but it's totally not that. But I get underestimated, I think, a lot. And I've been in multiple competitions with announcers where I have straight up won the event, won my heat, won my event, and I don't get announced. like they're talking about people who are on the floor. Like there was one event in particular where I won, like smashed the record for the event or whatever. And then I ran over the finish line and an announcer was still talking about these other girls that were, so this person in first place, this person in second place. I like turned to my judge and I was like, I finished, right? And he was like, yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. And the announcer did not call it like I was even there. Like it was like I was not even there. And that happened like twice, 2 or 3 times at that same competition. But it's like a somewhat common thing that I like don't get like not necessarily acknowledged. Not that, again, it's not like a vain thing. It's just that like people will genuinely act like you're not there sometimes. Yeah. Like you just do not exist.
It came out of nowhere. It's just came out of nowhere. You know, I've been actually winning the whole time, but it's fine. Came out of nowhere.
Yeah. So I mean, like that's like, and again, I think it's one of those microaggressions that you might explain to people, and they're like, "That's not a thing. You just are upset because you didn't get called in this competition." And I'm like, I'm not upset. Like that's not the thing. It's just that like I would like it to be acknowledged when I'm existing and when I'm like that like when I'm here, I would like to be acknowledged. And when it's like a pattern of you consistently aren't acknowledged, that's the issue. If it was like one event, I'd be like, who cares, whatever. Yeah. But when it becomes like a pattern of like people act like you weren't there, people act like you didn't do well, people act like who are you? You know, that's where it kind of gets like a little annoying. But I think that's also honestly like that's just like it's like again, it's just like a small thing. It's not something that's insanely like
it happens a lot, and it's interesting that you say that. Well, I was just gonna say because Kim Steele even said, I feel like oftentimes if you don't have the look, right, like they're looking at the athletes that look like what CrossFit is advertising out there as the CrossFit female athlete, you know. So if you don't fit that look, then they're not, you know. Because it's subconscious, and that's how race, racism, misogyny, all that works. It's so subconscious and deep, they don't realize they're not looking at you. And that is a micro, like that's a big thing because, and it happens, I mean, it happens a lot even with like, I've seen Brandon at competitions, I'm like, no, he's lifting the most weight. And they'll be like, this guy came out of nowhere. Like, no, he actually put the weight on, but nobody was paying attention because he doesn't look like, he's not the short white guy athlete with his shirt off, you know, like that's what happens. I mean, it's interesting that you say that because I've never really thought about that, but that is.
But that goes on, I think it was the same interview with Kim Steele. I was like, if a Black person was the best,
right?
Me personally, guarantees will push the white face forward. Even if the Black person was the best, male or female.
Why do you guarantee
because
it,
though? I like to guarantee things. And then I told you I guaranteed it. But anyway, even if my opinion is that even if a Black athlete, male or female, was the top person, they wouldn't get as much exposure as the white. Like the second best or third best would probably still get more exposure. I just know it because of what we're saying right now. It's like you can win a whole event and people act like you're a novice, but you've been on the scene for forever. It's like, no, I've been around. I've always, like we said it already. So it's like, I feel like even if you win the CrossFit Games, they still would probably be like, how the heck did he or she win the CrossFit Games?
Came out of nowhere.
I guess we couldn't work for it.
Well, and I think it's like, it's one of those things, like you said, like it's like a small thing, and when you say it, but really grand, because we got people that guarantee it. The reason it hasn't changed is because it's not the face. Like it hasn't been the face. It hasn't been normalized to see athletes not all look the same, right? Yeah. And whether that's what they wear, you know, where what they identify with. Like we haven't seen a non-binary athlete like get praise either. Like, you know, like there's a lot of things where it's like there's a standard that has been set. And until CrossFit or brands diversify this standard, we're going to keep having this guy guarantee things versus actually saying, no, we can change it. Like, you know, it's not something set in stone. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I like, it's definitely like something that I'm like curious about what would happen if someone of color or you know, that's against kind of the mold a little bit more, I guess, would make it to that like elite level, which is not like, I mean, like obviously Easy Mom and Elizabeth Akinwale made it there and everything like that. But I think even Elizabeth Akinwale was really underrated in her day. Like I have gone back and watched her videos and I'm like, she was just somehow so well-rounded, which was just crazy because she could perform so well, like a gymnastic event right into like a lifting event. And I feel like she was never given her real like true due about how well-rounded, like insanely well-rounded she was.
Yeah.
But I mean, like one of my favorite events is like there was that, like I don't remember, it was called Killer Cage or something. It was like a monkey bars event, and it was like with her, and everyone had been doing the monkey bars like exactly the same. Like they would just go down to the end, drop off, get up, and go. And she like went down, turned around on the monkey bars, and came back. And everyone just went crazy about it. Like this is old CrossFit, obviously.
Right? Okay.
But like that was just like, again, I think it's like one of those things. She was like absolutely one of like a just insanely good athlete. But I feel like, you know, and I wonder like, oh, if that, maybe that was because the sport was so young then. Maybe if she had been where she was like now, she would have gotten a lot more of her due. But yeah, I mean, like that's like a good question. I don't know if I can guarantee that they wouldn't. But I'm definitely interested to see what happens when someone kind of makes it there, like and everything like that. I would love to see how that plays out.
We've seen now the CrossFit Open is happening right now. We've seen a lot of open announcements head-to-heads.
Yeah.
Have we seen a person of color in one of those head-to-heads?
I can't remember all of them.
I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I remember all.
No, you don't even have. They reuse people before they actually even like
ask another person. Yes.
As much as we complain, well, I've complained about them putting Chandler Smith like as the
face,
the guy, like he deserves to be the guy, but they're force feeding it. But if he doesn't do an open announcement this year,
Dave Castro, we will know.
Anyway,
we'll have to see if Castro, if it happens, and we got 2 more weeks left at the time of this taping.
I'll say, I'll be like, I'm shocked. I'll be shocked if he does it. They just repeated a duo from 2017.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think it's also it truthfully, like, and I don't want to make the argument, but it is tough because I don't think the athlete development, which is I think a CrossFit issue, truthfully, is there for people of color necessarily. I think it's really hard. Well, first of all, because there is a standard for how I think CrossFit athletes are supposed to look that like had formed kind of out of just how the sport went. It's harder for, I think, people of color to get sponsorships. And I think that's like the first step with it, is that if you don't have a sponsor, it's going to be really hard to move up to the next level. It's like really, really hard because first of all, you're paying for, like, for example, programming. As a CompTrain ambassador, I get to have programming for free. But if I wasn't, I'd have to be paying for that. If I wasn't, you know, there's a lot of different things that start coming into play that you have to pay for. Body work, like food, all those different things. When you have sponsors, a lot of those avenues get freed up.
Yeah.
So that means that depending on your job, you can either work less and train more or something like that. It frees up so many avenues when you have sponsorships. I don't think people realize that that's like one of those micro things that has a massive like payoff. But when you have a sponsor, it makes a huge difference. And I could not like I don't think I would have a sponsor now if it wasn't for, again, God moment that happened. Like I doubt I would have one right now otherwise.
Yeah.
And that being said, like I think also people would then default to the idea that like, oh, you have to be good enough, you have to achieve something to get a sponsor, which is 100% not true. Because if you go on Instagram and you browse through tags, you will find people who have achieved absolutely nothing that have sponsors just because they might have entertaining content or whatever. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I haven't achieved anything at an elite level and I have sponsors. Like, I think it's, but the default then a lot of times for people of color, like, oh, well, they need to either qualify for the games or they need to get to this level to get a sponsor. And it's like, no, because if you go on Instagram, you just find people who look fit, who look cool or whatever. and they have sponsors.
Yeah.
So people of color need to be able to be like in the CrossFit space. Again, that's where one of those second, third steps that need to happen is companies need to be sponsoring amateur people of color, just like they sponsor amateur non-people of color, because that makes a really huge difference in what you're able to do and how you're able to compete, when you're able to compete.
Yeah.
And all of those things that get you to the next level. So it's like there has to be like almost that development there. And in the same way, like I was having a conversation with Ariel I feel like it might have been a year ago now because I feel like Corona was happening right now. I was having a conversation with Ariel Sanders, and we were just kind of talking about how CrossFit has always talked about CrossFit Health. That was a huge initiative. But if you're thinking about on the health side of things, right now, one of the groups in the U.S. that is disproportionately in bad health is Black people.
Yep.
Like disproportionately heart disease, diabetes, like affected by all these things that supposedly CrossFit is supposed to be fighting against. So if that's the case, what needs to be happening is boxes need to be opening in heavily Black areas, and they probably need to be there needs to be some infrastructure in there that's going to support that box and make sure that people in that community can go to it, that it doesn't become like a gentrification kind of
exactly
thing. But that should be something that is either, whether that be like a discounted membership or whatever. This company's massive. If you're going to tell me they can't even open a box like that is some kind of initiative or whatever, I'm opening one box in each major city, or in a couple major cities, in 3 major cities,
right,
that supports like that in the Black community, that is able to, you know, kind of like with Black owners, with Black coaches. Like if that's not like the idea that that's not something that can happen isn't something I wouldn't believe, and that's not to say that's like a simple issue or a simple fix or whatever. But if they were really serious about health, this should have been part of their initiative a long time ago. Because if you looked at the data of who's affected by like all of these diseases that they're fighting against, I mean, if you're looking at that data, you would have figured out, ooh, this is where we should start somewhere. Like some of this has to start with like focusing on a certain community.
Yes, it's interesting because we talked to Wiley Balasik and a couple of the coaches from We Lift You, and they are doing that. You know, like it's not about like they have community classes, like whether that's you send a coach that you're paying to, maybe they don't have a gym. I mean, they're working on creating a gym, a community gym, but they're sending coaches, CrossFit coaches, into the communities of majority people of color to do community classes. Like that's not necessarily, and he was like, and we use the same equipment. Like we're not trying to downplay like, oh, use these sandbags because we're going to get rid of them. Like it's about valuing the people that are coming because they deserve good health just as much as somebody who could pay $200.
Yeah.
So it's not a model that's not happening. You know, it's happening some places and it's possible. But like you said, if we can get one box to do it, then CrossFit, you might have a little bit more means. But so it's so interesting because we used to always ask like how to diversify CrossFit, but I think you kind of talked about that with like sponsorships and stuff. But how do you see a possibility of CrossFit becoming more inclusive? Because I think that's where a lot of it stems from. Bringing people in is a big deal.
I think it's gonna have to start with, I think with anything like that, it starts with media, which I think they've been working a lot on. Like I've seen a little bit more diversity in a lot of their advertisements for this Open specifically. So again, like, you know, kind of giving, you know, whatever, where you like see it, I don't know what the phrase is, giving
like props.
Credit, props, where it's due. That they were actually because that's matters. If I see a CrossFit ad that's all white people, I'm gonna be like, not my thing. Like straight up, that's what I'm gonna think. And I think that if you're like not like, if you're white, that doesn't register necessarily to you, but like that's a genuine thing that I'm looking for when I see something. If it's like all white people, I'm like, ooh, I don't know. I either think like, I'm not going to be welcome there, or I'm not going to be accepted there. I'm just going to be tolerated, you know? So having media that shows people of color, like of all ages, shapes, sizes, like, genders, whatever, all of that stuff, has a huge impact, I think, on drawing people into the sport. I think there still have to be some like kind of community initiatives. And I think there has to be kind of just recognizing that there has to be kind of some work to be done to shed the image of CrossFit being like an all white thing. And that's something that I like get all the time. I'll tell people I do CrossFit and they're just like, even Black people are just kind of like, really? They're like, it has a very like white image. And so I think that's just something that has to be worked over time. And I'm happy like to be able to like in some ways be a part of it, like being an image in CrossFit that, shows like, hey, like Black people do this too. Like we're like, we can do this. It's gonna be like, it's good. You can be welcome, like at a good box and everything like that. So I feel like for me, it's like media is where you almost always starts, but then there's again initiatives on the community level of figuring out how to put affordable boxes in areas. Because I think more often than not, what happens is these boxes pop up in like maybe Black areas, but it's again like a gentrification thing. Like they're not really meant for that community. They're meant for the people who work down the street, that not really like high-rise office building or whatever. So like kind of figuring out how to put more boxes in communities that are there to serve the Black community or the POC community that's surrounding it. I think is probably the next step after that.
Yeah. Well, this has been so lovely and great. We want to make sure you give your plugs because I definitely used some of your tips from your page today because I had to do the open and you told me to eat a banana and a protein shake. But please tell us where people can find you. Plug anything you'd like.
So like the number one platform is Instagram. It's gonna be at @whatisusupAnnie. And then I also have my website, OdysseyFPN.com, which is my company, which is Odyssey Fitness, Performance, and Nutrition. Also, I'm on YouTube. Same thing. It's just if you just like search Anastasia Lowe, you're gonna find me basically there. So yeah, the main thing is Instagram. Hit me up on the gram.
Yeah.
What is
what
up, Annie?
Odyssey FPN? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So Odyssey is basically the primary focus is nutrition, coaching. The general idea is that working out is like one part of your day, but that's like 1 hour out of 23. So what we're eating and what we're kind of doing for all of those other hours really adds up. And my goal basically with Odyssey is teaching people how to eat in a way that is sustainable for the rest of their life. So I'm very much against diets and fads and all of those things. What I want people to know is how to fuel themselves and how to do it for the rest of their life and understanding how to eat for whatever their goals might be. And that can be weight loss, that can be health, that can be weight gain in some situations. Like there's so many different factors that you could be looking for, but basically I do nutrition coaching, and my goal, I always say as a coach, is that at some point you don't need me anymore. Like it shouldn't be an eternal thing that you sign up with me and then you're with me for 2 years or something like that. Like I like to keep clients for about 3 to 4 month periods, and usually by the end of that time, the goal is for them to understand like, okay, this is how I need to eat. This is how I should eat. This is what I can do if I want to put on some muscle. This is what I can do if I want to lose some fat. This is what I can do if I just want to stay at my healthy weight, those kinds of things. So it's basically just like a functional approach to nutrition.
Cool. Well, Annie, Anastasia, this has been great. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Yes, it was good times. And go find her. Annie. What's up? What is up, Annie? With Annie.
What is up, Annie?
What is up, Annie?
What is up, Annie? Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Ooh, got the hookup now.
Thanks for tuning in. Lift and love all day, every day. Like and subscribe.